Welcome to the Daily Download. I'm your host, Amanda Lamb. During the major storms we had on Sunday, an EF1 tornado with winds as high as 110 miles an hour touched down on a quiet residential street in Garner. Thankfully, no one was injured, but it was a terrifying experience for people who live there. And the tornado left a lot of damage in its wake. WRAL reporter Eric Miller is one of the journalists on our team who covered the tornado, and he joins me to talk about what happened and how these residents are now picking up the pieces. Eric, welcome to the program.
Amanda, thank you so much for having me.
First of all, let's back up. How did you hear about it, and what did you know before you got there?
So we had a sense that this was going to be a bad day just going in from the beginning. It was a WRAL weather alert day. The National Weather Service had a level 2 severe weather threat for a good chunk of our area. And we saw what these storms did when they passed through Tennessee. This same line left 6 people dead, nearly 24 others injured. So it was something we had a very close eye on at the start of our day.
So you get there, you're called to go to the scene, you're working. What did you see?
Immediate damage. Woodland Road. It was Timber Drive and Woodland Road. You had trees down all over the place. You had traffic lights and traffic poles that had been pulled down. And as we started looking closer, you started seeing that, hey, this wasn't just cosmetic damage. This was damage to homes. This was damage to cars. A really significant impact left behind by this storm.
And I always know a couple of things when you go to a natural disaster. The first thing is your heart's kind of in your throat, right? Because you don't know what you're going to find. You don't know if people are going to be injured or even killed. And then secondly, it's so amazing how a tornado can affect one street, one little area, but then everything around it is fine. I mean, is that kind of what you saw when you got there?
Yeah, absolutely. And the area that this tornado hit, it was on the ground for about 1.5 miles. And the area that it hit is very residential. It's these winding neighborhood streets. So you'd go down one road and, you know, half the homes on one side would have damage. There'd be trees down all over the place. And the other side, it would be completely fine, completely untouched. And as we're going around, you are wondering, is everybody okay? Is anybody seriously hurt? And you got a sense, talking to people and looking at how they were out, kind of gawking at this damage, that everybody was okay and that this community had just dodged a bullet.
Absolutely. Okay, we're going to talk more about that after the break. Welcome back to the WRAL Daily Download. So you got there, there's people outside, you're looking at the damage, and you spoke to people at the scene, and I was really struck by the one man who talked about his mother was on oxygen. And so his first reaction was get her to safety, and then he said it was almost immediate. Tell me about his story.
Yeah, that was a very typical story from what we heard. That young man's name is William Shaw. He was there at his mom's house. She was sitting watching the TV. He was doing the dishes, and all of a sudden he gets that alert on his phone, that National Weather Service push alert saying that there's a tornado in the area. He needs to take shelter. He looks up out the window above the sink, and he can see it coming towards him.
Oh, my gosh, that had to be terrifying. Yeah.
Just amazingly terrifying. And so he grabs his mother. He gets her to the bathroom. And in the time it takes to do that, it's just a couple of steps away. That tornado is on them. It's blowing out the windows in their house. It's sent a tree down onto 2 vehicles out in their front yard. But everybody was okay, as was the case across the area. No injuries there.
So it's amazing that nobody was hurt. How did people react? I mean, it sounds like they were kind of stunned when you first got there. Yeah,
there was definitely a little bit of shell shock. You've got to remember this is a tornado that hit on a Sunday afternoon. People are not at work. They had already gotten home from church. A lot of folks sitting around watching TV, watching football.
It's a rainy day, right?
Yeah,
they're
exactly.
inside.
Yeah, you're not going to be out and about, especially when you know there's severe weather in the area. So you had a ton of people who were home and a ton of folks who then were in the bathroom or in the pantry or in the basement, whatever safe place they had.
Something interior, yeah. And I think it bears repeating. I mean, every time we talk about this, you need to get to a safe place as soon as you see that warning. If it's for your area, you need to stay. If you can get into a place with no windows, if there's a basement, a place in your home, even a stairwell. If you live in an apartment building or a condo, a concrete stairwell is a good choice. I know pretty quickly people were out there helping, and you mentioned that somebody called a church and immediately there were helpers, which is so incredible to hear.
No, it blew me away because we were out there the moment after this storm happened. We had been following it all the way in from Sanford and Lee counties. So we got there within 10 minutes of this storm happening. And within the hour, even with all the trees down, and we had dozens of trees all over the place, on homes, on cars, you name it, there were already crews out there, not of Asplund or professionals, but just people who were showing up with chainsaws to help. And that one story you mentioned, it was an incredibly touching moment. It was this young man. He had just bought his house. It was his first house. He'd moved in there in October, and his mom, in hearing this had happened to her son, texts her women's group at church and is like, "Hey, a tornado's just hit my son's house. He's got a tree down on his car, a tree that's just taken out part of his awning, the fence in his backyard. Can anybody come help?" And there were a dozen people out there, multiple chainsaws, all hauling down branches. It was incredibly touching to see.
Yeah, and I think I've seen that so many times also with hurricanes. It's that Mr. Rogers thing, look for the helpers, right? And I mean, there's always so many people coming out to help, and it's in the midst of a tragedy. It's something that really lifts your heart up. Talk about the damage assessment. You just got some information from authorities there. What do we know?
Yeah, this information coming in from Garner PD, and in the last 5 minutes of us talking, so this is on Monday morning, it's a total of 18 structures that are damaged in that area, according to Garner PD, some very significantly. The fence at Garner High School was taken down by trees that came down. There were multiple roads blocked by this storm. Those have since cleared up. And actually, there was a gas leak as well, which is something we weren't aware of yesterday. But with all of the sirens, the heavy firefighter presence, that would explain some of what we saw out there yesterday. So again, I think this just underscores how close a call this was, that we had this many trees come down on this many homes, this many cars. You had a gas leak there as well, and yet nobody was hurt. Yeah,
and I mean, that's the thing I think you keep coming back to when you look at a story like this, is the fact that nobody was hurt. I mean, it's just amazing. And the cleanup's going to take a while. I mean, these people are going to be dealing with this for quite some time. But did you get a sense from your experience talking to them on Sunday that they were just so happy that it wasn't worse, that people weren't injured, and that they're just dealing with property damage, as bad as that can be?
For the most part, yes. I think that's where everybody was. But I think that's also a reflection of the severity of the damage in a lot of cases. There were a lot of near misses to homes where, you had a tree come down on your house, but it took out the gutter, or it took out part of the gable along your home. There was one home, the most seriously damaged we found, which was on Buckhorn Road, and it had been cut essentially in half by a downed pine tree. And those folks, it's an open question as to whether that home is going to be salvageable in any way, shape, form, or fashion, or whether they are going to have to tear it down and start rebuilding from the ground up.
Right, and we definitely don't want to minimize the heartache of that, for sure. And the cleanup will continue. Thank you for your reporting, and I know we're going to continue to follow this and the progress on the cleanup. For updates on this, you can go to WRAL.com. Thanks, Eric. And thanks for listening to the WRAL Daily Download, a production of WRAL News. Looking for something to binge over the holidays? Check out my true crime podcast, The Killing Month, August 1978. Find it on WRAL.com, the WRAL app, or wherever you get your podcasts. As always, thanks for listening.